We have been taught to see history as a procession of unique events, each monument a singular fingerprint of its era, its culture. It seems self-evident that an ancient Roman edifice and a 19th century Muscovite structure should share nothing in common, save perhaps the stone from which they are hewn. But if we strip away the familiar names of cities, erase the dates from their plaques, and gaze only upon the forms themselves, a disquieting picture emerges. Our planet appears sown with near-identical replicas of the very same object. A global architecture exists as if, across millennia, disparate civilizations, without consultation, were working from a single, silent blueprint, erecting structures whose original purpose may now be lost to time or deliberately obscured. Nowhere is this strange architectural echo more pronounced than in the Triumphal Arch. Official history tells us they were built to commemorate entirely different victories for entirely different rulers. Yet their resemblance transcends mere stylistic imitation. These are not simply similar gates. They are edifices adorned with disturbingly identical and highly specific sculptural compositions. One is left with the impression that all of these arches, from ancient ruins to the bombastic gates of modern metropolises, are but components of a single, strictly regulated design, realized in different ages, but cut from the same template. To grasp the scale of this historical dissonance, one need only juxtapose two structures separated by a chasm of nearly 2,000 years. Consider the Arch of Titus, erected in the 1st century to celebrate the sack of Jerusalem, and the Triumphal Arch in Moscow, created in the 19th century to commemorate the War of 1812. Different epochs, different wars, different ideologies. But the decor of these gates aligns down to the most minute detail. On both monuments, we find the image of winged women, and, most perplexingly, a highly specific tableau, a human figure standing before a colossal snail. This enigmatic element repeats with an obsessive consistency. We see it on the Arch of Septimius Severus, built in the year 205. We notice it in the time-worn canvases of Canaletto depicting ancient ruins, and we discover it again on the facades of buildings raised centuries later. Even the Arch of Constantine, dedicated to the Battle of the Milvian Bridge, bears these very same symbols. The situation descends into absurdity when we apply the logic of the very conflicts these giants were supposedly built to honor. Consider the paradox of the Napoleonic Wars. In Paris stands the celebrated Arc de Triomphe, glorifying the victories of the French emperor. In Moscow, an almost identical structure rises, intended to immortalize the victory over that same Napoleon. Logic would suggest that the monuments of the victor and the vanquished should speak in different tongues, that they should stand in stark, symbolic opposition. Instead, they whisper in the same architectural language, hinting at a story far older and far stranger than the histories of the nations they claim to represent. They ought to be fundamentally different, charged with opposing symbolism and emotional weight. Yet, in reality, we find virtual twins. The same forms, the same winged figures, the same decorative elements. An inexplicable picture emerges. Whether an emperor was victorious or vanquished, whether an arch was raised in his honor or to commemorate his defeat, the result is invariably the same. The architectural code remains unchanged, as if the actual events of history had no influence whatsoever on the appearance of these structures. The geography of this phenomenon is not limited to Europe. In late 19th century New York, an arch appears, bearing the same collection of sculptures. Madrid, Paris, Moscow, Rome. Across the world, we observe the same stone stage, the same silent decorations. This consistency forces us to doubt the official version of why these gates were built. Perhaps their true function was never to serve as a memory of human endeavor. Among all the repeating elements, there is one that upon detailed examination becomes the most unsettling. It is the depiction of armor. On the Porte Saint-Denis in Paris, constructed under Louis XIV, and on analogous structures in Moscow, sculptors have reproduced empty armor with a fanatical precision. But this is not simple protection. If one looks closely at the structure of the metal, it becomes clear that we are facing something that transcends the human understanding of war. This armor does not just repeat the shape of a body, it imitates flesh itself, creating the sense that inside it, there was once something that only remotely resembled a human. Delving deeper into this chronological labyrinth, we encounter facts that official historiography prefers to write off as a continuity of styles, or a banal imitation of antiquity. However, under careful analysis, this version crumbles to dust. Consider the temporal abyss that separates two seemingly unrelated epochs. On one side, ancient Rome of the 1st century AD, a time of legionaries, the gladius, and pagan cults. On the other, 19th century Russia, an era of gunpowder, artillery, and an entirely new world order. The difference is nearly 2,000 years. Over such a colossal span of time, languages change, peoples disappear, religions and building technologies are transformed. But if you place the architectural projects of that ancient time next to their modern implementations, what you see is not evolution, but a frightening stagnation. Or, what is more likely, the blind copying of an unknown original. The Arch of Titus, erected in 81 AD, is, according to the official version, a monument to the brutal suppression of the Judean revolt and the destruction of the Jerusalem temple, a moment of Rome's imperial might. Let us now travel across millennia to Moscow. The Moscow Triumphal Arch, designed in the 19th century, is dedicated to the expulsion of Napoleonic forces. The context would seem to be entirely different. And yet the form persists. A silent code passed down through ages. It suggests that these great stone gates may not be monuments to our history at all, but markers of a memory that was never truly ours. Wars of liberation, the defense of a homeland. These are the justifications for monuments built to celebrate victory. But why then are the decorative elements of these structures identical, down to the finest stroke? The sculptural groups that adorn them are practically interchangeable. We see the same winged women, conventionally called goddesses of victory, but their poses, their attributes, and their placement on the facade adhere to a single, unyielding standard that permits no deviation. Particular bewilderment is caused by one specific, almost surrealist detail, an image that stubbornly migrates from one century to the next, ignoring the shifting tides of culture and regime. It is the depiction of a man standing before a giant snail. In the context of military glory, triumph, and valor, a snail seems an utterly alien, an absurd symbol. What possible connection could this mollusk have to the capture of Jerusalem by the legions of Titus? And how could this same image relate to the Battle of Borodino or the Great Fire of Moscow in 1812? Nevertheless, this enigmatic scene is reproduced with photographic precision on both the Roman original and its Muscovite descendant. It forces one to wonder if the architects of the 19th century were not merely inspired by antiquity, but were instead executing a strict technical mandate, the meaning of which was not entirely clear even to them. They were copying symbols whose significance may belong to another reality entirely, one with no connection to either the Roman or the Russian army. This pattern is not limited to just two arches. On the Arch of Septimia Severus, erected in the year 203 to honor victories over the Parthians, we find the same familiar silhouettes. When Emperor Constantine raised his own monument in 315 after winning a civil war, he too did not alter the established design. Again, the winged figures. Again, the same compositional choices. Even in the canvases of the famed painter Canaletto, known for his meticulous documentation of cityscapes, one can discern ancient ruins bearing absolutely identical bas-reliefs. The winged woman and the man before the snail. They are a kind of watermark, a seal stamped upon structures across the globe and throughout time. It is impossible to believe that such uniformity is the result of chance or simple fashion. Fashion is fickle, capricious. It rarely outlives a century. Here, we see an unshakable canon that has persisted for 2,000 years. It suggests a strict adherence to a single, hidden standard, as if some global design institute dispatched blueprints to different corners of the planet, across different epochs. Stonemasons and sculptors changed, empires rose and fell, but someone, or something, compelled humanity to erect these strange portals in their immutable form, preserving every last detail, even the most absurd. If this were only a matter of external form, the archway, the vault, the columns, one might dismiss it as mere architectural tradition. But the persistence of these inexplicable symbols suggests something more. It hints at a language written in stone, a message we have long since forgotten how to read, left by architects who were, perhaps, not the masters of their own design. One might be tempted to dismiss it as mere architectural heritage, a simple echo of classical tradition. But the identical nature of small, symbolic details, such as the enigmatic figure of a man with a snail, points to something more profound. It is a phenomenon akin to a cargo cult, where an external form is replicated with perfect fidelity, yet the object's intrinsic meaning, its very purpose, remains a mystery to its builders. And if the similarity of decorative forms raises questions, the logic behind the dedication of these monuments leads to a complete impasse. For if the arches are twins, why are they consecrated to events that are, by their very nature, antithetical? How can the same symbol signify the triumph of entirely different forces in entirely different conflicts? Herein lies a logical rupture, one that fractures the comfortable continuity of our historical narrative. In analyzing these historical discrepancies, we fall into a genuine logical trap. The only escape is to question everything we believe we know about the great wars of the past. While the similarities between ancient and modern structures might be explained away by cultural inheritance or a reverence for the classics, the monuments of the 19th century utterly demolish this conventional cause and effect. Consider the most glaring example of this absurdity: an enigma bound to the figure of Napoleon Bonaparte and the events of the War of 1812. In the center of Paris rises a monumental triumphal arch. According to official historiography, its construction was conceived by the emperor himself, an eternal symbol of the French army's invincibility and the glory of its conquests. It is an altar to victory, a hymn to military expansion, a tribute to the genius of Napoleon. The logic seems simple. The victor builds a monument to himself. However, if we transport ourselves thousands of kilometers to the east, to Moscow, we confront a structure that induces a profound cognitive dissonance. Moscow's Triumphal Arch was erected to commemorate the diametric opposite, the complete and utter rout of that very Napoleonic army, its expulsion from Russia, and the collapse of French ambitions. Here lies the paradox that history prefers to ignore. Two monuments dedicated to irreconcilable enemies. One glorifies the aggressor, the other the defender. One symbolizes the dawn of an empire, the other its ignominious end on the vast Russian plains. Yet, if you place these two objects side by side, or even compare their detailed descriptions, you discover that they are practically twins. They share a similar cyclopean form. They are crowned by similar chariots, and their bas-reliefs tell the same visual story. The result is a historical non sequitur. Both the victor and the vanquished are immortalized in precisely the same manner, using the exact same architectural code. It is as if the stone itself is indifferent to the human drama it purports to represent, retaining only the shape of triumph, a hollowed-out symbol whose original meaning has been lost to all but the dust. Imagine two warring nations, in the aftermath of a brutal conflict, erecting absolutely identical monuments in their capital squares. It would seem a mockery of common sense. A monument to victory is meant to demonstrate the superiority of one nation over another, the humiliation of the enemy, the heroic sacrifice of one's own soldiers. But in the case of Paris and Moscow, we see a strange unification, one that erases the very line between victory and defeat. A persistent sensation arises that these structures have no connection to the specific battles and figures we are taught about in history books. It is as if the War of 1812 was merely a pretext, a smokescreen hiding the necessity of erecting another standardized edifice according to some approved global plan. The geography of this strange standard is not confined to Europe, nor does it end with the Napoleonic era. In the United States, in New York City, the Washington Square Arch was raised in 1892. It was built nearly a century after the events in Europe, on another continent, in a completely different political context. And yet, it reproduces the very same forms, the same sculptural motifs. This confirms a suspicion that triumphal arches are not monuments to specific people or events. They are, perhaps, markers of presence, functional structures, or cult objects of a single, unified civilization, one for which our modern state borders held no meaning. We gaze upon these majestic gates and attempt to read their history through the prism of the wars we know. But in doing so, we may be committing a fundamental error of translation. The symbolic language spoken by these stones is far more complex and far more grim. If we strip away the imposed names and dates, all that remains is naked form and frightening details that cannot be explained away as artistic fancy. And amidst all this grandeur, there is one element that transforms mere bewilderment into a genuine fear of an unknown past. The answer to the true purpose of these arches may be hidden in the most gruesome, anatomically detailed element of their decor, one that most tourists simply overlook, mistaking it for a common military trophy. It is hidden in the so-called empty armor. Looking closely at the details of the Porte Saint-Denis in Paris, built in 1672 by order of Louis XIV, an investigator confronts an inexplicable phenomenon. On a superficial inspection, it is easy to dismiss as a sculptor's whim. But upon detailed study of the so-called trophies adorning the facade, a picture emerges that inspires a deep unease. We see a jumble of armor. But this is not the plate mail one finds in a museum of chivalry, or in engravings depicting the real battles of the past. Before us is not protective ammunition, not something designed to deflect the blow of a sword or spear. It is something else entirely. Before us, a haunting mutation of the naked human form, frozen in metal. Traditional battle armor was always an exercise in pure function. Its surfaces were engineered to be as smooth and seamless as possible, designed for a single purpose: to deflect an enemy's blade, to let the killing blow slide away without purchase. Any superfluous detail, Any ridge or depression on the cuirass was a fatal flaw. A deadly trap where the point of an arrow or the edge of an axe could find its mark and breach the fragile defense. But what we witness here, on the gates of Saint-Denis, and on similar reliefs in Moscow, utterly defies this calculus of survival. The smiths who crafted these forms with an almost manic devotion forged the anatomical minutiae of soft tissue into hard steel. On these strange breastplates, we see the clear outline of pectoral muscles, the sculpted relief of the abdomen, and most baffling of all, the soft, natural protrusion of a belly. Why would anyone forge armor that so faithfully replicates the physical idiosyncrasies, even the vulnerabilities, of a specific human body? It is as if the artisan sought not to create a protective shell, but a second skin. Know intimately that every anatomical detail emerges. We can even discern the navel, the subtle articulation of the rib cage. This is no mere suit of armor. It is a cast of living flesh, translated into bronze and stone. This obsessive detail, so senseless from a military perspective, repeats with haunting consistency across the globe. From the spires of the 17th century to the Borodinsky Bridge in Moscow, we find the same empty husks. They stand, retaining their volume and form, yet there is nothing inside. An eerie impression takes hold, that these suits were designed not to protect a human from an external threat, but to perfectly imitate the human form itself. They are less armor and more a sophisticated vessel whose primary function was camouflage. The notion that this is merely an artistic convention, a way to celebrate the human physique through armor, simply fails to hold. Ancient sculptors celebrated either the unadorned athlete or the warrior in functional plate. What we see here is a hybrid, a chimera, a body of metal. Why render the vulnerability of a soft abdomen in hard, unyielding steel? The only conclusion that presents itself as we stare into these empty figures is that the purpose of these artifacts was something far more sinister than ceremonial dress. This appears to be a disguise, a suit engineered to allow a being, the thing inside, to pass as human, concealing its true nature beneath a perfect, metallic lie. We gaze upon these vacant, yet unnervingly lifelike shells, and a cold realization begins to dawn. Perhaps the greatest threat was never the one faced on the battlefield, but the one hiding in plain sight, concealed within the perfect armor of a man. The skeleton of an insect. The sculptures seem to capture a fleeting moment of departure. The owner has vacated its shell, leaving behind only a perfect, hollow cast of the human form. And here, at the strange intersection of metallurgy and biology, a disquieting question emerges. If this armor, with its meticulously crafted muscles and abdomens, was not designed to protect a human in battle, then for whom was it made? Who was the wearer? The entity that required such a flawless imitation of the human physique while concealing itself within a metallic carapace. We now approach a hypothesis so profound, it threatens to shatter the very foundations of our recorded history. What if the great monuments of antiquity are not telling a story of human conflict, but of a confrontation with something else entirely? If we accept that the anatomical precision of these artifacts is not the flourish of a master artisan, but a design born of stark, utilitarian necessity, we arrive at a staggering conclusion. We are not looking at a means of protection, but a method of deception. This is technologically sophisticated camouflage, engineered to obscure the true nature of the being within. The theory posits that these shells were constructed for life forms of a different biology, beings who needed not merely to deflect a physical blow, but to merge seamlessly with humanity, to become indistinguishable, at least from a distance, or in the chaos of conflict. The logic is as simple as it is terrifying. A human has no need for armor that mimics a naked torso, complete with a navel and defined musculature. Beneath the metal, the human form already exists. For a person, armor is a second skin, a functional barrier. But for a creature whose physiology is fundamentally different from our own, possessing another limb structure, perhaps, or proportions entirely alien to us, such a suit becomes the only viable means of existing in our world. Here the metal serves as artificial flesh. It sculpts a silhouette our brain is hardwired to recognize as one of its own. It is a biomechanical facsimile, an exoskeleton designed to fool the eye, to convince the observer they are facing an ordinary warrior and not something utterly other, sealed within a technological shell. This one possibility forces a complete reevaluation of the conflicts immortalized in stone. Perhaps the great triumphal arches scattered across the globe do not speak of shifting imperial borders or the political ambitions of Caesars and emperors. It is conceivable they stand as silent monuments to a different kind of war. A global conflict fought not between nations, but between species. A war in which humanity faced a civilization that used these perfect anthropomorphic shells for infiltration. A war whose most terrifying artifacts were not weapons, but masks. Imagine an army encased in bodies of metal. They are invulnerable to conventional wounds. They know no fatigue. Their very appearance creates a profound cognitive dissonance, seemingly human, yet frozen, cold, and impervious. The intricate rendering of muscle and sinew on these cuirasses suggests the imitation had to be perfect. This was no crude effigy, but an attempt to recreate humanity in metal, down to the most minute detail. Perhaps the beings within could not endure our atmosphere without protection. Or perhaps their true form was so terrifying, so alien, that contact without such a suit was impossible. The empty armor we see today upon monuments, these are those to rust. We gaze upon them and see only the form, the substance long since vanished, leaving us to wonder about the nature of those who once piloted these artificial bodies. If we entertain the possibility that our planet was a battlefield where such technologies of mimicry were deployed, then the symbolism of our triumphal arches takes on a sinister hue. These are not monuments to human valor, but memorials to an interspecies collision. And here, a crucial question arises, one upon which our understanding of the present depends. Every war ends with a victor. Traditionally, the winner seizes the spoils and displays them as a demonstration of the enemy's humiliation. The vanquished either vanish or submit. To understand the outcome of this hypothetical confrontation, we must look not at the armor itself, but at its posture on these monuments. The body language, the silent arrangement of these empty shells, can tell us more about the finale of this drama than any history book. The poses these metallic phantoms hold are the key to deciphering who truly dictates the rules of our world. To grasp the true outcome of this ancient and forgotten conflict, it is not enough to simply acknowledge the strange armor on the facades of historic buildings. The key lies in the emotional context, in the unspoken language of pose and composition that sculptors embedded into cold metal and stone. If we carefully analyze the disposition of these metallic shells in different parts of the world, a picture emerges, one full of frightening contradictions, hinting that the history of victory we have been told may be a fundamental fabrication. Let us turn to Paris, to the Porte Saint-Denis. Here, the composition of the so-called trophies has a very specific character. The armor, mimicking human anatomy, is often depicted in a state of submission, of defeat. But the story is not told in the stone of a single monument. It is whispered across continents, in the silent posture of metal and marble. The victors, it is said, write the history books. But perhaps they also sculpt the memorials, leaving behind a chilling, coded message about the true nature of their triumph and our defeat. In chaotic heaps, they lie in poses of utter passivity. They appear dejected, drained of all internal force. It is the age-old tradition of the victor's spoils, the discarded munitions of a vanquished enemy, a mountain of inert iron, its threat forever neutralized. Looking upon the reliefs of Paris, one might assume humanity was victorious here. These hollow husks hang as a reminder that an enemy was broken, its protective shells torn away, its menace erased. It is a monument to human triumph over the beings that once hid within these artificial bodies. But journey eastward, to the heart of Moscow, and the narrative fractures in a deeply unsettling way. On the Borodinsky Bridge, and among the decorative elements of the city's triumphal arch, we find the same anatomical armor, chiseled with musculature, even navels. But here its behavior is radically different. They do not lie defeated. They stand, erect and proud, upon pedestals and colonnades. Their posture exudes an unyielding confidence, a silent authority, an unshakable calm. They hold weapons and shields, not as trophies, but as an honor guard, eternal sentinels watching over the city. The contrast is nothing short of chilling. Consider the fundamental logic of any war memorial. A victor never immortalizes the vanquished in a pose of glory. The defeated are depicted with heads bowed, their banners cast at the feet of the triumphant, or simply as a pile of captured armaments. Yet in Moscow, we see proud, majestic statues of empty armor towering over the mortal throngs below. Official history tells us these structures were built to honor the human victory in the War of 1812. Why then are the most prominent positions of honor occupied by the effigies of the very enemy they supposedly defeated? It is as if victory belonged to them, the beings inside the suits. Imagine the sheer absurdity. An army wins a war only to return to its capital and erect colossal statues of enemy soldiers in full battle regalia, frozen in heroic poses. It defies all logic. The implication, therefore, is as unavoidable as it is terrifying. Moscow's arches and monuments are not a celebration of human valor. They are memorials to the true victors. Those same entities whose hollow, metallic shells now gaze down upon the generations of passers-by. Perhaps, within the grand accepted narrative of the Napoleonic Wars, another conflict was fought and lost. A battle where humanity, at least in this territory, was utterly defeated. These are not mere arches of triumph. They are symbols of domination, carved by another civilization, cementing its status in stone and bronze for all time. We may be living in a world where the memorials to our own conquerors stand hidden in plain sight, their silent, metallic forms guarding a history we were never meant to understand. They stand in our central squares, silent and hollow. We admire their beauty, their grandeur, never comprehending their true purpose. This empty armor does not appear as a discarded tool of war, but as a vessel, waiting for its occupant to return. Or worse, as an idol, placed for veneration. They are a symbol of a power that requires no flesh to command the world. In one city, they may stand as trophies, suggesting a resistance that was, perhaps, successful. But in countless other places, they hold the posture of absolute masters. If we accept the premise that they won this hidden war, a logical question arises. Where did they go? Why do we not see them marching through our streets today, clad in these terrifying anatomical shells? The answer may be more disturbing than the war itself. It's possible they never left at all. Technology evolves. Centuries ago, they may have required cumbersome metal suits, scaffolds mimicking the human form, simply to exist in our environment. But over time, they would have perfected their methods of mimicry. They would have learned to create shells no longer distinguishable from living matter. Not by touch, not by sight. Those proud statues, then, are merely a tribute to their own primitive past. An homage to an age of iron men, an age that has given way to an era of total and invisible integration. If the metal shells of the past were merely crude instruments for an alien life form to adapt to Earth's conditions, the next step in this logic leads to a truly unsettling conclusion about our world today. What once required kilograms of bronze and iron to simulate a human torso can now be achieved on an entirely different level. The evolution of their camouflage was inevitable, moving from crude external exoskeletons to perfect biological mimicry. Imagine the sophistication of a civilization that could erect identical, cyclopean structures across the entire planet, in an age when travel between continents took months. For such beings, the creation of synthetic skin, artificial muscle, even a complete copy of the human organism would be a trivial matter. The armor, with its sculpted musculature and even a navel, is a relic left in a museum, a reminder of a colonial period when they could not yet breathe our air or withstand our gravity without support. Today, the need for metal has vanished. With their current technology, telling them apart from us has become an utterly impossible task. It is perfect integration. Your neighbor, the politician on the screen, a random passerby, any one of them could be a vessel for the same consciousness that once hid inside the empty armor at the city gates. We can only guess at who and what walks among us. How many now walk among us, occupying key positions, guiding the vector of human development along a path of their own design. Indirect confirmation that these triumphal arches serve not merely as monuments, but as focal points for hidden processes, for rituals, can be found by examining the events that unfolded around them in later times. One of the most peculiar and mystifying episodes is the farewell ceremony for the renowned writer Victor Hugo in the year 1885. Archival accounts and chronicles of this event paint a scene far removed from any traditional rite, Christian or secular. It resembled nothing so much as a vast occultic ordinance. The writer's body was not laid in a cathedral, but was placed specifically beneath the vaults of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. The structure itself was transfigured beyond recognition. The arch was shrouded in colossal black crepe, transforming it into a sinister, dark portal looming over the city. Giant urns of fire, arranged around its perimeter, cast flickering shadows across the facade, creating the atmosphere of an ancient pagan sanctuary. The entire composition appeared as the set of some grandiose mystery play. What purpose was served by placing a humanist, a man of letters, at the heart of a militaristic monument, dedicated, we are told, to the military victories of Napoleon? What is the connection between literature and the triumph of conquerors? The answer may lie in the arch's true purpose. If this is an energetic nexus, a communications portal for these unseen rulers, then a mass event involving millions of souls was not a farewell. It was an accumulation, a harvesting of the crowd's immense psychic energy, or the conducting of a ritual of passage. The arch, draped in black, appeared as the open maw of another world. The ceremony beneath it an assertion of power over the minds and souls of mankind. We are accustomed to viewing historical monuments as benign art, as beautiful pictures from a textbook. We walk around them, we take photographs, and we never consider that we may be looking at an instruction manual for the capture of a world, written in a symbolic language we have been taught to forget. The triumphal arches scattered across the coordinate grid of the globe, the identical sculptures, the empty armor mimicking living flesh, the strange rituals conducted beneath these vaults, all are links in a single chain. They are the material proof that our history is far more complex and perhaps more terrifying than the official narrative allows. We perceive the stone and the metal, but we fail to see the architects who commanded their placement. And they, perhaps, stand just beyond our sight, having exchanged iron carapaces for flawless human masks, continuing a game whose finale we have yet to comprehend. For one must ask, which is the greater madness? To entertain such a theory, or to believe that across the entire world, humanity simply and accidentally began to build the very same gates, adorned with symbols that mean nothing at all. Consider this the next time you pass beneath such a structure. From the height of these columns, who truly gazes down upon you? Is it a hero of the past, frozen in bronze and stone? Or are they something more? Silent, eternal observers of our present. The answers to these questions have the power to reshape our perception of reality itself. For these are not merely sculptures. They are points of view made manifest. In their silent, unblinking gaze, we are forced to question not only who they were, but who we have become.